3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. I should say Happy New Year, even though we're a little bit into it, because I think this is the first official event that I've been hosting so far. We had a big event planned for last week in Antarctica, but the weather did not cooperate with us, so we had to take a little pause on that event. So it's great to be back and hosting and jam-packed January as per usual. So do head to exploringbytheseat.com, find all the live events we have coming up, and we look forward to hanging out with your classrooms for another year, 2025. So we have an amazing event today. I'm really excited. This is the first event in a new series called Pioneers of the Possible. So this is a live event series hosted by renowned Arctic and Antarctic explorer, climate advocate, and citizen scientist, Sunniva Sorby. So this unique series celebrates extraordinary individuals who are rewriting the rules of what's achievable, breaking boundaries in their respective fields, and driving meaningful change in the world with an aim to bring these inspiring individuals into classrooms and communities across Canada and the US. So many of you know Sunniva. We have had the pleasure of working with her for years now. So over the course of her storied career, she's journeyed to some of the most remote and awe-inspiring places on Earth, from the icy expanses of Antarctica to the fragile ecosystems of the Arctic. So you guys know Hearts in the Ice, along with Hilda Strom. They made history as the first women to overwinter in Arctic Svalbard without men, spending 19 months over 2 years collecting critical climate data in partnership with groups like NASA, Scripps, Oceanographic, and many others. So she will be our host, and I'm going to turn things over to her in just a little moment, but I must talk about our guest for today. Kicking things off, we are so excited to have Gemita Samarra joining us. She is a former synchronized swimmer, a stunt woman, and lead stunt double for James Bond's SPECTRE, among many other films and productions. She's a writer and producer of an animated TV series highlighting forgotten women explorers. She's worked across the globe with archeologists, activists, and doctors as a photojournalist, and has a pretty cool ongoing research project called Shortgevity. So looking at how our life expectancy has been shortening in recent years. So I'm so excited to get to meet her, hear a little bit of her story, and then of course we're going to turn you guys loose with your questions, but we can't get things started until I bring in Sunniva. Let's bring her in.
Hey.
Hello, how are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great. And I'm so excited for this series, Joe, because over the years, lucky me, I've gotten to meet some amazing, amazing people. And I couldn't think of a better woman to kick it off than Gemita, who I met about a year ago at a retreat up in Nemo Bay, actually. So, and today I have to tell you, today's the anniversary of this. Can you believe it? It's like 32 years ago, just yesterday, right? We reached the South Pole, and I had to do a little digging on, well, because Gemita, I have to give away her age. She's 31. So that's like half my lifetime ago. And in that time, we've seen a little bit of change. There was no possibility for us to be doing this 30 years ago. Smartphones weren't around. We didn't have GPSs. We didn't have any citizen science apps. We didn't have climate awareness was really not a thing. We didn't have artificial intelligence. There was no social media, no Facebook, no Instagram. Isn't it amazing? And so one of the reasons I wanted to invite Gemita is in her short lifetime, she has done more things than I've ever seen anybody do. So it's a perfect way to kick it off.
All right. Well, let's get her in here.
Let's get her in here.
How are you?
Very well. I'm honored to be here, honestly. Thank you so much for having me.
so happy you're here, Gemita. And I'm just like, you're a new friend for me in the last year, and it's just been awesome to hang out with you and spend time and learn a little bit more about what you're up to. And if it's okay with you, I just want to kick it off with a couple of questions just to give people an idea of you. I mean, you have been on some amazing adventures, from being a stunt woman in James Bond films. I mean, who does that? You. To working with archeologists and now creating stories about forgotten women explorers. And I'm just really curious, is there a moment or experience that's really changed the way you see the world? And how did it actually inspire you to keep pushing boundaries? Because you keep pushing the envelope.
Thank you, Sunniva. Yeah, one moment that really sticks out to me that really changed my approach to life happened within the first few weeks of me living in Kampala in Uganda, which I'll talk about a lot more later on. As I generally do when I arrive at a new place, I spend a lot of time watching people, observing how the community works, how people live, how they source food, navigating impossible conditions. And one thing that stood out to me was this narrow, rickety old bridge crossing a highly polluted river in an area called Chibondo, which is in the middle of Kampala, and is a critical access point for the area as well. Across a few days of me using and passing by this bridge, I saw children falling off, big loads of things that people were carrying, toppling over the edge, and people shoving past each other. And I was just thinking, I wish this bridge were just a little bit wider and it just had sides or rails. And so I asked the locals, and they loved the idea, but explained that because it wasn't broken, it wasn't a priority. And so it hadn't really been thought about very much. They offered to introduce me to the chairman of Chibondo, and I had shared what I had witnessed, and he gave his permission and his blessing to widen the bridge if I wished. So I gathered a small group of locals, and we widened the bridge and added handrails using mostly upcycled materials. And within weeks, the bridge had inspired others to improve their nearby bridges, and it almost became this kind of bridge-off competition of who had the funkiest bridge. And that moment changed me. It showed me the power of a small action and how that it can kind of ripple out and create something much bigger, and reinforce that pushing boundaries isn't always about grand gestures or how much money you can throw at something, but it's about seeing a need and listening to people and taking the first steps to make a difference. And that is a big lesson I've carried with me into everything I've done since.
Wow, that is huge. And what a beautiful story. And you remind me of, just in all the things I've been reading about why people don't change when we know that we need to actually change how we're living to deal with today's circumstances. We can't force anybody to change, but we can lead by example. What a great story to illuminate that. I'm just going to ask you one more question, and I'm going to hand it over to you just to take it away. But you have shared with me the series that you're working on of extraordinary women from history who are basically forgotten, who we know very little about. And why do you think it's important for young people like those joining the call today, or even adults for that matter? Like, I was really blessed to learn about those 6 stories. Why do you think it's important for us today to learn about these women, and how can their stories really inspire all of us to be a little bit bolder and more courageous in our own lives?
We all need that. I do believe it's very important for people to learn about these women, and I talk about women and men and children of all ages to learn about these stories, because these women are proof that figuring out your own unique path driven by passion and curiosity can be life-changing for yourself, but even historically impactful. These women weren't superheroes. They were real people, and they saw obstacles as challenges, not as barriers, and that courage doesn't always come from being the strongest or the loudest, but from believing in yourself and being true to yourself and your passions. I can't wait to introduce you to them later.
Oh, great. Well, I'm going to hand it over to you, Gemita, just to take it away. And I'm just really, really grateful that you're kicking off this Pioneers of the Possible series.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Well, Gemita, echoing what Sunniva said, it sounds like you've had some amazing experiences all around the world. So we're excited to learn a little bit more about that. And just a shout out to our classrooms, those who are backstage, those who are tuning in via YouTube. Get your questions ready, because it's your time to shine after. And hopefully we'll be bombarding you with questions after your little presentation.
Sure.
All right. So yeah, Gemita, when you're ready, if you want to share the screen, I'll keep an eye for it. and make sure it's nice and loaded, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good.
All right. To those classrooms on YouTube, just a reminder, anytime you want, you can start sending those questions in via the live chat, and that'll help us have those ready to go as well when the time comes. All right, I see the screen share loading, and that's normal. You just have to click it one more time and the presentation will pop to the front. Or sorry, just click on the presentation one more time.
Hold on, I'm just gonna, sorry everyone.
No worries at all. It's tech, sometimes it takes an extra click.
Are you seeing my window here?
Yep.
Are we seeing the videos on the side as well?
Right now I just see black, so maybe it's not at the beginning of the presentation?
It is at the beginning, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I'm gonna do, okay, if we're on black, we're good to go. So I'm learning that stories aren't always about what you've done, it's how you've done them and why. And as I'm explaining my story, I'd like for you to consider my perspective on life, which is to open every door and explore every room and feed curiosity above all else. So as you know now, my name is Gemita Samarra, and I'm a stunt woman, filmmaker, and creative activist. I'll start from the beginning. I was born in 1993 into a family of Spanish and British circus performers. My mother was a trapeze artist and my father was a clown. I kind of lived in my own world and made my own opinions of things earlier than expected. I had more animal friends than human friends, and I spent most of my time on my own, inventing things, taking things apart and putting them back together again, or exploring outside. At 5, I became obsessed with horses after a birthday riding lesson. My parents couldn't afford regular lessons, but I had to find a way to ride, so I helped out on the weekends, which meant putting on a pair of stinky rubber gloves, dragging a large bucket around, and hand-picking up horse poo in the arena. But I didn't care. I was going to ride at the end of the day. It wasn't always the best outcome. I would only get to ride whatever pony was left, and it was usually the naughtiest of the group. But he taught me how to ride the hard way, but in the long run, it made me a much better rider, and I credit much of my life to the experiences I had on that farm. As a teenager, I became very competitive in sports. I even joined the Olympic pathway team for modern pentathlon, which is swimming, fencing, running, shooting, and show jumping horses, with dreams of competing in the 2012 Olympics. And my dreams were, at the time, they were coming true, but unfortunately, injuries cut my plans short. I had a lot of shoulder dislocations and I needed a surgery, which forced me to slow down for the first time ever and reconsider my longer-term plans. During recovery, I came across a sports-focused modeling agency, and I was sent an audition for an acting role for a TV series looking for underwater performers. My new agent knew that I was comfortable in the water because of my synchronized swimming and swimming backgrounds, and she submitted me despite having no experience in acting. I was invited up to the audition with the director where they were filming. My role was to play a ghost, and I spent weeks filming in a 10-foot-long black gown with whole-eye black contact lenses and paint on my teeth. I had so much fun, and having not grown up watching a lot of TV, this was a very exciting and new world for me. For 2 years, I carved out a whole career for myself as an underwater stunt performer. And after a lot of training, I got my first job out of water on Fast and Furious 6, then on Game of Thrones, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. My career was really taking off, and I couldn't have been happier. I was then hired as the lead Bond girl stunt double for the new James Bond movie, Spectre. Now, I grew up a huge James Bond fan, so this was really a big deal for me. I got to travel the world and do crazy stunts and filmed at all the real locations as well, so that was a super cool experience. You can see in this bottom right GIF here that my face, this is during rehearsals of a table being kicked at me. It wasn't meant to snap and smash me in the face quite like it did, but there you go. Things don't always go to plan. But after filming on James Bond, I felt a strong pull to do something more impactful and explore another side of me. And that's when I started volunteering in refugee camps, first in France, then Turkey, then Greece and Syria. I was kind of making it up as I went along, seeing where I could be most helpful. And I found my strength was in organizing the area where new refugees arrived, documenting people's stories and organizing donations and resources. I saw how people, even in the toughest conditions, find ways to build resilience and community. And these experiences inspired me to focus on making a difference through more hands-on work. Someone along the way told me that Uganda in Africa is the best place in the world for refugees. Now, I didn't know what that meant, so I had to go and figure it out for myself. So in 2017, I moved to Uganda, splitting my time between the capital city in Kampala and Nakivale, which is a 65-year-old refugee camp. During my time in Kampala, I worked on a large variety of projects, from helping develop something called the Ghetto Research Lab, which is a place in the heart of Chibando, where we prototype growing methods to grow food in impossible living conditions. We built water filtration systems through aquaponic and fish farms. We grew food out of upcycled materials. We built a compost toilet and composting station to create fertile material to grow food in, because this is the area they're living in, and the ground is made up of several meters deep of trash. You can see on the riverbanks there, so it's impossible to grow food in the ground. So for most of my projects, I've been using upcycle materials to keep costs low and use available resources. We built whole buildings out of bottle bricks, which are waste plastic bottles packed tightly with other waste plastic to form these very strong bricks. Now, upcycle materials are things that might normally be thrown away, like old bottles or rubber tires or scraps of wood and broken items that are creatively reused and turned into something new and useful. In Nakivale refugee camp, I connected with a small group of women from Congo. We hosted community meetings about what others would like to see improved in the camp. And so we put together a project identifying 12 systems in the camp that they wanted to improve or change, everything from waste disposal to hygiene to education to women's health and sports and music facilities. And we decided the best way to do this was to initiate one of these projects per month over the course of a year. It was actually spanning from International Women's Day. And we called the project 364 as a bit of a joke, because we were like, well, what are we going to do on the other 364 days of the year that aren't Women's Day? So this project was born, and every month we dedicated to getting a project up and running to the point that it could be maintained. And then the next month we would start a new project. And by the end of the year, we had 12 fully functioning projects. I spent a lot of time working and playing with the kids, which was one of my favorite memories at Nakivale, and developing like fun and safe environments for them, and lots of art programs, and did lots of yoga and dance classes. And this was one of the highlights of my life. Now, while I was living in Uganda, I received an invitation to join, it's actually a Canadian group called Adventure Science Team, on an expedition with a group of explorers and archeologists to travel to the northernmost tip of Oman in the Middle East. The expedition goal was to deliver a very skilled and specialist archaeologist to some very hard to access, unmapped historical sites. The team had attempted the expedition a few years prior, and one of the guys broke their leg. After years of replanning, they had raised funds to do an even bigger expedition, and this time to traverse the entire 100-kilometer length of the peninsula. Now, for those unfamiliar with the word traverse, it means to travel along, not up and down. So in this case, we traveled along the top of the mountains. The expedition was wild and intense. This was unmapped, so we always had to be prepared for anything. And after a couple of weeks, we successfully completed the traverse and mapped hundreds of sites, from mass burial sites to over 150 agricultural patches, whole villages. I found this really cool piece of pottery. It was on this expedition that I took with me a book called Valley of the Assassins by Freya Stark. Remember that name because she is a bit of a legend. Learning about Freya and her many, many adventures got me interested in researching more incredible women that I had somehow never heard of. Now, the picture on the right is actually of me reading this book in an abandoned vehicle on the coast of Oman. I camped the night in the back of it under the stars, and it's no wonder I was inspired by her adventures. So over the past few years, I have found my top 6 favorite women's stories, and I'm currently writing a stop-motion animation TV series about them. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with stop motion, it is a way of making things move that don't move, like toys, clay figures, and imagine like a a little Lego man. So they look like they're alive and moving on their own. You take a picture of it and then you move it a tiny bit, you take another picture and you move it and you keep repeating that. And when you play all the pictures back really fast, it looks like the doll is walking or dancing or whatever you make it do. It's kind of like flipping through a flip book. If you've seen The Nightmare Before Christmas or Shaun the Sheep or Wallace and Gromit, Wendell and Wild, Coraline, these are all examples of stop motion animation that were made with physical puppets. So all of the women you're about to listen to are real. So this is Freya Stark. She was the first person to draw accurate maps of the Middle East, and she did it by herself, riding donkeys, camels, and horses across the desert. Now, what made her special wasn't just her courage. It was her way of connecting with the people that she met. She didn't just pass through an area. She learnt their language, spoke 7 languages fluently, and heard their stories and shared them with the world. When Freya was 13, she lost her right ear to a factory accident and began wearing large floppy hats to cover it up, which became her kind of iconic look. She wrote over 100 books and stories about her adventures and lived to be 100 years old when she was still adventuring until the day she passed away. Jean Barret from France wanted to join a ship on an expedition that was going around the world, but the French Navy banned women on ships for being weak and distracting. So she cut her hat off and disguised herself as a man to get around that and joined the ship as an assistant botanist. For 3 years, she kept up her disguise on a ship with over 100 men. She traveled the globe collecting thousands of plants, most of which were completely new to science. When the boat arrived on the island of Tahiti, the locals knew immediately that she was a woman, and despite being praised for her strength and scientific contribution on the ship, she was kicked off. And after taking the long and slow way home, Jean unknowingly became the first woman to circumnavigate the globe. Now, she shows me that if rules don't make sense, that sometimes you have to kind of bend them to achieve greatness. Bessie Coleman had one dream, and that was to fly. But in the early 1900s, being a Black and Native American woman meant no flight schools in the US would train her. So she taught herself French and traveled to France, as they were open to all races and genders, and earned her pilot's license there, the first woman of her background to do so. But Bessie didn't stop at becoming a pilot. She became a daredevil, moving back to the US and performing death-defying stunts in air shows and inspiring others to follow their dreams. Annette Kellerman from Australia suffered from polio as a child, which had her in giant metal leg braces, and eventually she lost the ability to walk by the age of 8. The doctor recommended that she tried swimming to condition her legs and build some strength, despite how difficult it was to begin with. She trained and she trained, and she became such a strong swimmer that she actually ended up being able to walk again. This was a miracle. Then there was no stopping Annette. She became a competitive swimmer, but keep in mind, this is at a time when women weren't even supposed to show their arms or legs in public. They had to swim in these heavy, thick dresses. Can you imagine swimming lengths in a dress this thick? Annette decided that swimming in a heavy dress was dangerous and silly, so she designed the first ever one-piece swimsuit, but then she got arrested for wearing it in public. She fought her case and won, which changed the way that the world saw women in sports and gave women access to the sport of swimming for the first time. She became a champion swimmer, a fitness model, an icon, and became a Hollywood star. Ada Blackjack. Now, in 1921, Ada joined an expedition to a small, snowy island in the Arctic as a seamstress and a cook. She took the job on so that she could afford medicine for her sick son. Unfortunately, shortly after arriving on the island, things went horribly wrong. The ship that was meant to come back and pick them up was unable to return due to the ice. And after a few months of waiting, the 4 men she traveled with had died from various illnesses and injuries. So she's now completely alone in one of the harshest and loneliest places on the earth. For nearly 2 years, she learned how to survive by herself. She learned how to hunt, build shelters, and face down polar bears. And eventually, a rescue team found her and was most surprised to find her by herself. She finally returned home and reunited with her son. And this is Qingxi. She was actually sold by her own father as a child, but then rose to become one of the most powerful pirates in history. After marrying a pirate captain, she didn't just take over his fleet when he died, but she built it into a force of over 80,000 pirates and 1,800 ships. She defeated the emperor twice and had very strict rules for her crew, outsmarted entire navies, and negotiated a retirement deal so good that she lived out her days wealthy and respected. Now, if there's a few things I hope you take away from my story and these incredible women, it's that curiosity and passion can take you to places you never imagined. Life doesn't follow a straight path, and that's the best part. Whether you're chasing a dream or figuring out what excites you, just let curiosity guide you. Pursue what feels meaningful to you. Don't get caught up in comparing yourself to others or following someone else's version of success. Your path is unique, and the world needs your perspective and your ideas and your passions. And I truly am very grateful for you all listening in, and I would love to answer any questions you might have.
All right, let's get everybody back in here. Yeah, that was an amazing presentation. And, you know, we get to work with a lot of female scientists and explorers, and I hadn't heard a lot of those stories. So you found some incredible stories to highlight. And each one of them is pretty amazing. I hope the class get a chance to dig a little bit deeper after today.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gemita. I'm still reading this book.
Isn't she incredible?
She is absolutely incredible. It's just a whoosh. I'm like, I've done nothing, you know?
Sure.
Well, you said not to compare ourselves, so I won't go down that road. But that was really astounding. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think it's time we turn things over to a little Q&A action. So I'm going to visit some camera classroom shortly. If you're tuning in via YouTube, don't be shy to use that chat sidebar. Sunava, if questions come in for you, is that fair game today as well?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, perfect. Well, let's start off here. Our first group, 6'7" are joining us in British Columbia. So let me bring them in here front and center. Hey, Division 2, how are we doing today?
Great.
There they are. All right. Do we have a question or two to get things started?
We have a question, yes. What experiences in your young life helped you to do all the great things that you've done?
I think variety is the key. I think it's very easy to hone in on one goal and do nothing but try and achieve that. And in doing that, you miss out on a lot of other experiences. I think trying to gain as much experience in things that seem very irrelevant even has been the key for me.
All right. Well, Drinkwater, we'll tuck you away for now. But if you have a follow-up question, use the private chat and let me know to come back to your class, and we'll grab another question from you. So I'm going to go to our YouTube chat and we'll grab our next question from there. First question we have for you here, Gemita, is about, you know, you shared those stories initially, and then your time with the archaeologist in the field. But growing up, the question is, were there any female influences in your life that really inspired you?
I mean, Jane Goodall has always been an absolute hero of mine. I would say from memory, she was definitely kind of my biggest hero at the time. And especially my love for animals as well. Jane represented everything that I wanted to be when I grew up. So yeah, I'd say Jane Goodall.
Yeah, good choice. So you and I have hosted her together in one of our Hearts in the Ice events.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was the last call that we hosted on video from Bumsaboo, the little hut we were in. Yeah, we had enough upload speed to be able to get on video. And I just remember at the very end of that call, we thought she wanted to ask us about us, and she just said, "How's the dog?"
That checks out. Yep, absolutely. And you know that just speaking of those calls, it really goes back to technology. When we did our initial calls, we couldn't get you guys on camera. You guys were voices on WhatsApp, on speakerphone. That was the best we could do. Then by the time of the end of the second year, we could get you on video for short pauses. since then, we're sending units out in the field where we're broadcasting at speeds faster than your living room in the middle of the ocean. So it's crazy the way.
Now we have Starlink. So even places like Bumsaboo, you could get coverage all the time using that. So yeah, it's amazing what's happened in 32 years.
Yeah. I think this is a question that both of you could take a stab at. This question is from a 4th grade class in Michigan, and they're wondering about things you have seen in your travels, climate related. Is there anything that stood out to you, a story or an experience?
Yeah, I think there's probably quite a few. The thing that just came kind of screaming this way, I'll just start with that, is probably living up in the Arctic for those 19 months and experiencing such drastic changes from one season to another, which really point to climate related changes that are human induced, only because they've been studying the sea ice for so many years. And that has a real, like a visceral impact on you emotionally, because you're seeing it. And then you start to look at the wildlife and how the species are impacted by the changes in the ice too. And that's really been striking. It's also been striking for me to go down to the Antarctic for 30 some years, not every year, but quite a bit over the years. And also witnessing drastic changes in the glaciers and the distribution of different species, or I should say the redistribution. What about you, Gemita?
I mean, you've spent a lot more time in cold places than I have to see those changes. I've spent a lot of my time in blisteringly hot places, so I've seen kind of the opposite effect of that, and drought and famine. But yeah, it's impossible to not see the planet constantly changing. I mean, even now with what's happening in LA, and there's constantly changes that we need to be taking more attention to, I think.
Okay. We've got a fun question here from a class. Well, this is a class in Niagara Falls, and they're wondering about, Gemita, the industries you've been in, Hollywood, stunts, things like that. As a woman in those fields, are there any obstacles you've had to overcome?
I did find, I mean, I was the only woman, for example, on James Bond, I was the only woman on the stunt team. And I found that to be the case across multiple jobs, and that's not uncommon. There aren't as many women in the stunt industry. I did find myself having to prove myself a little bit more, but I tend to just kind of keep my head down and crack on. There have been many occasions in other industries, like working out in the field, like in Uganda, traveling solo as a female around the world in dangerous places. Obviously comes with its risks, but I've just always kind of had my wits about me, and I've made decisions based on how I feel at the time. I try not to go into a situation assuming the worst, but likewise not being overly optimistic, because you've got to be kind of prepared for anything. But yeah, I would love to see more women doing what I've done.
Yeah. And so if we put the question to you as well, I mean, 30 or more years ago, visiting Antarctica and places like that, did you find anything like that? Did you have anything you had to overcome or contend with?
Well, it's interesting. When you do something that hasn't been done before, especially as a woman, there's a lot of resistance, and there's difficulty even psychologically to imagine that, we could be successful. And that was the case for the South Pole expedition. We didn't get one corporate sponsor for that project, and it cost $1 million. We raised $600,000 US before we left, and that was from people like us on the call. It was, the average donation was $20. So that speaks to kind of the war of the swarm and the collective, and how much community can support individual projects and people. And that was how we raised the money. But we've come a long way. I mean, now we have women in space. We have, just today I read that somebody from the UK reached the South Pole sort of under the fastest time. So there's so many different strides that we have made in science and technology and in the world of exploration and even media, where women are really tipping the scales now and showing up. And I'm looking forward to the day when we don't question that anymore, and it's just like it just is what it is. We're just all equals, aren't we? Just given opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So Miss Maxwell's class was with us backstage. They had to duck out early, but they were nice enough to leave a couple questions behind. Gemita, they're curious, is there a project or a place you're visiting soon that you're really excited about?
Ooh, yes, I intend to do quite a bit of more research on my women's stories. Sunniva and I have very loosely talked about the idea of going to Wrangel Island, where Ada Blackjack went, and doing an expedition there. So we've got some planning to do to make that happen, but that would be incredible. Otherwise, where am I headed next? I'm actually not into this year. Has been already such a whirlwind. I think I'm going to be doing quite a bit of travel around. My family's all in Europe, so I'll be spending some time over in Europe again this year, because I haven't spent much time over there since COVID and all that. I've been living in Canada now for the last 6 years, so I'm definitely ready to get back out there.
All right, fair enough. Another question from our group, Miss Maxwell's class. They're curious about preparation for a role, a stunt role. What is that like? What does it take to be in something like that? Like, I guess maybe Bond or something.
Yeah. I mean, every job, you think you know what you're getting yourself into. You know, you get hired to do a horse job or a water job, and you're like, okay, cool, I'm good at those sports. There should be no issue. And you show up, and all of a sudden, you have to unlearn everything you've ever known about that sport to perform the stunt. For example, I've fallen off a lot of horses in my time, you know, competing and everything, and you generally want to protect your organs and limbs when you fall. But when you're doing a stunt, and for example, you've been shot with an arrow, you have to fall off the horse after you've been killed or something, you can't go into your kind of natural instincts to protect yourself. And a lot of it is kind of unlearning skill to relearn how to do it for the film. Relearning styles of like fight coordination. And I think a lot of it is mental preparation as well. When I've got to do something, I don't particularly like doing high falls. I'm okay falling into water and stuff, but I've never been like I've never liked jumping off of like the buildings and doing all that stuff. So that takes a lot of kind of mental preparation for me. I do kind of more breath work and more kind of meditative preparation for that kind of stuff. But otherwise, it's just training full time and just making sure that you're always prepared to do anything, because you never know when you're going to get a phone call to be like, hey, can you jump off of this or be on fire over here? So it's just making sure you're ready for anything at all times.
Okay.
I'm happy I don't get those phone calls.
You do all your own stunts up in Bumsaboo in Svalbard. You're doing all your own stunts.
I'm like, I never get a call. Hey, would you like to jump off a? Unbelievable.
All right. I've got one more question that group left behind. Are there? I guess it's award season right now. So, are there awards for stunt work?
There are tourist awards, and there's been a lot of kind of push to get stunts more recognized across other awards as well. But yeah, there is a large award ceremony called the Taurus Awards that recognize stunts.
Okay. Looks like we've got Miss McKinnon's class with us. A grade 6 student. They're in Mississauga, and they're wondering the meaning of your name, Gemita. Is there anything behind that name, or what does it mean?
Yeah, it's a Spanish. It's meant to be a nickname, and it means little gem. So typically, things with "ita" at the end of it in Spanish tend to kind of make things smaller, and so yeah, little gem.
All right, very very cool. Well, we have a few minutes left. The questions from the chat have been great, so don't be shy if you have one or two more questions in the chat with us before we wrap up. I will check in with our classroom in BC one more time because they might have another question for us, or it'll be just nice to see them. So we'll check in really quickly, see if you guys have a quick question for us. Oh, there we go. Someone's coming up.
Okay, just curious. Do you have any siblings?
I do. I have an older brother, and he, like me, has done a lot of very different things in his life. he is an avid rock climber and has spent a lot of his times in very cold places. And his whole thing was combining film with his sports as well, but in a slightly different way. He was more of a camera operator. So he's, done lots of things in Greenland and filming. He climbs walls and films other climbers. And he now lives in Utah, converting vans into adventure vans as well.
All right. Very cool. Well, thanks, Drinkwater, for that great question. Awesome. Okay. I think a great question before we leave off for today is the series is called Pioneers of the Possible. So we're highlighting stories and boundary pushing and trying new things, maybe doing things outside of your comfort zone. So for students, and again, this question can go to both Sunava and Gemita today, is when you're faced with something that's maybe outside your comfort zone, maybe it's something that you don't want to do, or maybe hasn't been done before. How do you kind of push yourself over any doubts before you do something and try something new?
I could try to kick that off. And it could be even dealing with something that you don't want to deal with. It's, I mean, we're living in a very interesting time right now where I sometimes wonder, can I even be an inspiring voice out there in the middle of all this chaos that we're in as it relates to climate change? And all I do is try to go back here, and try not to think too much, and take action on the things that I really believe in and care about. And I think that creativity and curiosity have gotten me far, as long as I trust my instincts. So I rely a lot on something that I've developed over the years, which is just that little internal needle that says you can do this, and not listen to all the stuff that can play upstairs, and just trust myself.
Yeah, and to echo that, I think a lot of the time it's the thinking about the what ifs, and the what ifs haven't happened yet, and you can't control what happens necessarily. But I think a lot of it comes to being present and being in the moment and focusing on what you're doing, because otherwise it can be very overwhelming. So to try and just really focus on what you're doing at the time, and recognize how it makes you feel as well, because you can't assess how something's going to make you feel until you've done it. And so you've got to come into it open-minded, and maybe you'll enjoy it, or maybe you won't like it, and that's okay, but at least you've tried.
And Gemita, if you don't mind, I want to pull out something that you shared when you were speaking, and that is to not compare yourself to other people, or think that we need to outdo something that's already been done. Is just like I say, just be yourself. Everyone else is taken.
And to not even it's not even trying to outdo someone else. It's just doing something because someone else is doing something, I think can be a little bit misleading sometimes. And I think, just finding what you truly love and what you believe in is always the strongest.
Yeah. Well, I find the two of you both very inspirational and impressive. Some days when I know I have a big pile of emails, it's tough to motivate myself to open those emails. So I can't even imagine the preparation where someone's going to be kicking a table at your face that day. So pretty
Joe, what
impressive.
about you? You have started exploring by the seat of your pants many years ago, and before that, it was probably just an idea. What about yourself?
Yeah, I was a classroom teacher, and it was a risk to kind of leave a steady job to start this organization. But I found real kind of comfort in talking to others in a similar situation who took chances, followed something that they loved. A lot of people talk about how if you can follow your passion and find a job that doesn't feel like work, there's nothing better. So that's kind of something I've always pursued. And what I get to do every day doesn't feel like work most of the time, except for those emails. So yeah, that's kind of what drove me, is passionate about it. I knew it could work, and you just kind of have to take that first step. Yeah. Yeah. And one more question we're going to squeeze in here. It just came in via YouTube. So Gemita, are there things you do in your daily routine that help you stay ready for the next adventure or the next opportunity? Is there, important parts of your daily routine?
Doing a lot of different things does require a bit of organizing and planning. I'm a very spontaneous person, but I'm also a very planny kind of person as well. So I rely on a lot of lists, and I'll make lists for like a month long of things I need to achieve that month, and daily lists, and break everything down that way. So a lot of it is kind of that prepping and planning. And yeah, I think that's probably the most important thing for me.
Yeah, perfect.
Structure.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Gemita, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us and to kick off this series. Sunava, I'm so excited that we've got this rolling. I know we've got a new one cooking up for February. A mutual friend of ours is going to join us, which is pretty cool. And just a plug for February. February is one of our favorite months here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For the last 10 years, we kick all the men out and we just host women in science and exploration all month long. So it's going to be
cool.
It's going to be a fun month. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, looking forward to it.
Yeah, awesome.
Joe,
Well,
thank you.
Yeah, Gemita, again, thank you so much. It was great to meet you virtually and have you hang out with our classes today. To our classes, those were amazing questions that you sent in to us via the chat today. And Sunma, maybe I'll toss it back to you. This is the first event of the series, so maybe I'll let you sign us off.
All right. Well, I really want to give Gemita a big, big hug and say thank you, because it really is nice to shine a light on people like yourself that are doing extraordinary things. And you're so, in the time I've gotten to know you, you're so approachable and so easygoing. And then behind all of that is a whole world of experience already. And so it's a pleasure to be able to share you with this this platform. And I look forward to next month with you, Joe. So thank you.
All right. Excellent. Well, great start, a great conversation. I can't wait to see your series, Gemita.
Thank you.
All of the stories you shared are amazing. So I envy the research you're going to be doing and pulling these stories together. It's pretty cool.
Very cool. I'm very excited. Thank you so much, everyone, for having me here.
All right. Well, we're going to sign off for today. Hope everyone has a great rest of the week, and hopefully we'll see you soon in another live event. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye, everybody.